The problem with Korean students' way of studying English is basically there is a Korean student's way of studying English.
Is team study a good way?
I would say yes. It is a very good way if you do it well. If understanding someone means holding up an empty glass and pointing to it and the waiter's looking at you going, and he brings you another drink, your conversation is successful.
Hello everyone, I am Seung-eun studying English Linguistics and Language Technology in Hufs. Today I'm going to talk about learning English conversation with a special guest today. Could you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Seung-eun. My name is Professor Shaun Manning. I've been at Hufs for a long time. I started here in 2001, left in 2010, came back in 2014, and I've been here since. I teach English conversation in the ELLT department here at Hufs. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So the first question is, what do you think about Korean students' way of studying English?
The problem with Korean students' way of studying English is basically there is a Korean student's way of studying English. Really, language study should be personalized. You should be doing it your own way. And what we see here in Korea is everyone is basically doing the same thing. And it's a very academic or classroom-oriented way of studying. Now, this comes from the school system and its emphasis on test scores and the lovely SUM test. Which in turn stemmed from a need in the 1970s and 80s to have people who could use English in the business world, which in those days, everything was on paper. You didn't need to talk, you need to write a letter. Things have changed, and even though students recognize the need for practical English learning and practical English techniques, they don't do them. Even the Ministry of Education recognizes this. It's in the Korean national curriculum that there has to be communicative language teaching. The high school textbooks have projects in them. They have essay or paragraph writing in them. The teachers just skip those pages and do more things to prepare for the tests. So what's really lacking here, and both in the school system and the after-school system, is balance. Balance between this academic style of teaching and learning and a more meaningful or practical-oriented style of teaching and learning. And that's what we hope to give our lovely students here. The idea that practical means help the academic means help the practical. But you need to do both.
Very detailed answer, thank you for that. Actually, I asked him to be here because do you know that your nickname is Shaun Manning?
I did not know that.
Really?
I thought it would be devil, but
Because he is the Bible of like practical English lectures.
shoot me now.
So move on to the next question.
Mhm.
What do you think is the most important thing when learning English conversation?
It goes back to what I said a minute ago, but I want to take a time and put everyone to sleep by talking about something kind of technical here. When we talk about speaking, we're talking about kind of three stages or three things that have to happen before you can actually say something, and that is you need to conceptualize, you need to think of what you're going to say. And this is in any language, you're Korean or me in English, or when you're learning a foreign language. You need to generate an idea. Then you need to formulate your idea, which means you're now taking that concept and putting it into words. And this requires grammar knowledge and phonetic knowledge. And finally, you have to say it. And this requires your articulatory system working. All of this depends on your lexical knowledge, your knowledge of vocabulary, and your knowledge of discourse. And by discourse, I mean here that different types of conversations require different language and different, let's say, rules or behaviors. And in order to get good at English conversation, you need to know all of these things and use them quickly, effectively, and let's say fluently in a variety of content, a variety of discourse situations. the better you get at English conversation, the wider ability to apply your English knowledge into different contexts fluently and comfortably expands. If you're going to learn English conversation, first of all, you have to think of what kinds of conversations, and then set reasonable goals. Like, I think this is probably the most important thing, is that your goals should be reasonable. You can't say, I want to learn English conversation and speak like an American by the end of the summer. That's not possible, right? Your goals have to be reasonable. And then start from your strengths. You have interests, you have ideas, you have things that appeal to you as a human being in your first language. Use those first to get into the foreign language. Also, your personality. If you're an introvert, you're not going to be able to go talking to random foreigners in Myeongdong. It's just not going to happen. So don't try that, at least at first. Work with what you have to build on what you can't do yet. And that's the third thing, is to challenge your weaknesses. But if your goals are reasonable and you start from your strengths, you'll realize your weaknesses aren't that weak. At some point, you need to review, and you need to make it a habit. And with those things, you can come up with a pretty good way of learning English conversation that's useful and possible for you. And when I said back at the beginning, the problem of a Korean style is that there is a Korean style. There should actually be 50 million different Korean styles. And that's what I would like to tell our viewers about learning conversation. Do it your way. I say this because, to go off topic, we know that people who speak many, many languages, people who speak 9, 10, 15, 20 languages a year, they all do it differently. You have 20 people who speak 20 languages, they all learn their languages differently from each other. So stop copying, start self-reflecting, working from what you know well, and challenge your weaknesses little by little and make it a habit.
Is team study a good way?
I would say yes. It is a very good way if you do it well. Okay? And bad learning is bad learning, doesn't matter. You can be one-on-one with a teacher and it's bad learning, it's a waste of time. And same thing with team study. Certainly, team study lends itself to English conversation because generally you need someone to talk to. So your first issue with team study is find people who have similar but not identical interests and abilities to yours. Team study forces you to commit to studying, but you don't want to overcommit. More on this later, but you don't want to overcommit. And you get this shared experience of, I don't want to say struggle, success. Shared success in your language learning journey if there's somebody there with you. So it is a good idea, but you should make your team's procedure or process for your team. You can have more than one team as well. You don't need to be stuck with just one group. And decide on what the goal of this team is. So if you're doing team study for a class, which is probably the most common thing here at Hufs, you want people from that class, people who can meet. Generally, you want to meet as often as the class meets. So if the class is a once a week, you want to meet once a week. And I suggest, it's not the Bible, but I suggest that you meet before the class and do your team meeting as a preview. What this does is it gets a lot of the mistakes out in your group, and you're in the class and you can perform better. Even if you're not performing with your group members in the class, you're with other people, meeting before and previewing is probably the better approach. If you're not associating your group study with a particular class, don't overcommit. Once a month is probably enough. If you can meet more frequently and everyone's willing to, sure. But my knowledge of the situation, if it's more than once a month, you often end up having to cancel many things, or somebody drops out and the group kind of disintegrates. Once a month is probably sufficient. And if it's not associated with the class, you want to be doing something with this group that members of the group like. So nobody likes talk. Don't do talk. Go to a hagwon for talk. If you meet as a group, my suggestion is do something like a book study or a movie study. Either one of those is probably a good thing. You can read a book in a month. And ideally, you would read an English book because it's got English input. But if you're running out of time and you can't make it to the group meeting, go to the library, get the Korean book, read the Korean book really quickly. At least you can still talk and discuss in the meeting. Because remember, the meeting time is reserved, or should be reserved, for meeting things. So you can read the book on your own. There's no point reading it at the club, right? You should be talking at the club. And same thing if you're going to watch a movie. Watch the movie at home. Watch it with subtitles. Watch it again with English subtitles. Watch it a third time with no subtitles. That's, for lack of a better term, that's homework. In the meeting, talk. Because that's why you're having that meeting. That meeting time should be spent talking, and talking mostly in English. The other thing with this kind of a club is you want to personalize it. You don't really want to spend a lot of time just discussing the literary features of the novel. I mean, you can do that in literature class. It's better to go with questions like, what would you do if you were her? Right? Or, I didn't like the ending, let's make another ending. Right? Or something like this. Or, how would the story be different if so-and-so did this other thing? Where you're getting your own ideas expressed. Because remember, the idea of a conversation is to express your ideas. Not to tell someone what they could have read online somewhere else, a critique of the book. You're just repeating other people's ideas. You want to make it your own. So in your team study, you want to focus on doing team things that you can't do individually. So discuss, listen, debate even. Something like, or recreate. You don't want to spend your teamwork time doing what you could do individually. Things like finding vocabulary, paraphrasing, summarizing. Or things like if you're doing a movie study, there's a part you don't hear the speakers very well, try shadowing that. Try repeating after one of the speakers, something like this. But this can all be done individually. It will help your conversation ability. Learning new words will help you speak. But don't spend your meeting time doing that. Do that beforehand and become able to discuss. So my point, I guess, final point here about teamwork is have something to talk about. And that something should be interesting to the members of the group. If it's a Hufs class-oriented group, obviously you're going to talk about the class. But if it's not, if it's something else, have something that's either shared interest or one person chooses each time you meet either something to read or something to watch, and everybody has to do it. Okay? And talk about it on a personal level. One drawback of group study is that you don't get a lot of feedback on your language. What you get is feedback on your ideas. You're discussing a movie, or you're talking about a music video or something. Feedback on language, you've got to get on your own before or after. There's lots of ways of doing that. You've got lovely ChatGPT and Grammarly and these sorts of things, but be careful. These tools are not always right. In fact, yesterday I was watching some follow-up news broadcast. Do you remember there was a Rolls-Royce crash in Apgujeong? Yeah. Well, the Google Translate version of that talks about the Rolls-Royce driving onto the India. The India. It's Indo. The main sidewalk. So I took the transcript and I put it into Papago and it did the same thing. And we're talking about a car accident. Okay, yes, they have car accidents in India. But, so be careful when you are using the electronic things that they're not always right. I'll give you another example. My wife has a book club, and my wife is a retired English teacher. And they meet once a month and talk about a book. And she asked me something about it, and I haven't read the book, so I had to read the book. And then I went to ChatGPT just for fun, because I couldn't remember the guy's name. So I asked ChatGPT, give me the 10 main characters of this book. It gave me 10 characters, and 8 of their roles were correct. So the main character and the main character's role, but 2 of the roles were completely wrong. And I read the book, so I know they're wrong. I'm going, ChatGPT, you're not right here. So I say, you got these 2 people wrong. So, oh, I'm sorry, yes, you're right. So if you're expecting feedback from it, you might not get a correct answer. That's my warning about the electronic stuff. You're better off looking at multiple sources. Or if it's something about grammar, vocabulary, just go to a dictionary.
Actually, it's like a additional question. Like, is Zoom meeting be good for practicing English conversation?
It's better than nothing. These days, the quality of Zoom, the quality of the internet is generally really good. The problem with these systems is usually external. Like, if one of the members is in a cafe, they have to constantly mute and unmute their microphone because all the background noise comes in, and it comes in. It's really strange. We know from academic research on this that background noise coming through the microphone or through the earphones in Zoom is more distracting than background noise if you're in the coffee shop. So if you're sitting in the coffee shop talking to each other, there's background noise, you filter that out. Your brain filters that out really well. But if you're in your house on Zoom listening to someone who's in the coffee shop, the background noise from that coffee shop does not get filtered out. So as a means of talking, yes, it's fine, but try and have everybody in a relatively quiet place with a stable internet connection.
What should I consider the most when speaking in English?
When you're talking to someone, you want them to understand you. That's all. You don't need to be perfect. If understanding someone means holding up an empty glass and pointing to it and the waiter's looking at you going, and he brings you another drink, you have succeeded. Your conversation is successful. If you need the police to come and you pick up the phone and you call them and they come, your conversation is successful. They're not checking your grammar. And I think a lot of Korean learners or Japanese and Chinese learners as well suffer from this, that they spend too much time trying to formulate the perfect sentence, the perfect way, and never actually articulate. And actually, you want to go from conceptualizer to articulator quickly, especially in a live conversation. In that time frame, the person listening to you will pick up on the social context, the situation, and they're not idiots. They can probably guess what you really are trying to say. So don't think too much about having exactly the right words to say. Think in terms of what you need and how to get it from who you're talking to. And that's mostly what holds students back, is that they just wait and try to formulate. Likewise, if you're listening to someone in this conversation and they have this big, long, empty space, you should wait. Really good speakers sometimes tend to jump in too quickly while the person is still trying to formulate. And if you're in, like back in the group talk situation where you're trying to learn, it's probably better just to wait. And if they still, you've got 5 seconds or so, then you can say, do you mean, and help them out a little bit. But focus on getting your meaning across. Another thing is, if you've got more to say, use some kind of body language or eye contact to signal that you've got more to say. Again, English speakers don't like silence. So even if you're just going, what, and if you have to do that to keep the other person from jumping in or changing the topic or whatever. And if you're speaking in a classroom, make all the mistakes you can. Unless it's a test. If it's a test, don't make any mistakes, please. But if you're in a classroom, your job is to get better, and you're not going to get better if you're not making mistakes. So don't treat the mistake as a problem. Treat it like, hey, it's your best friend, and you're going to learn from it. And so make as many as you can. So those are my tips for water speed.
Today we talked about learning English conversation with Professor Manning from Hufs Bible of Practical English. And do you have any last comment?
Yeah, well, I guess all the way back to everything is do it the way that works for you and enjoy it. You know, like I used to be an athlete when I was your age and I used to run. Nobody can run my laps for me. I have to run them myself. You have to learn your language for you. Nobody else is going to do that. So you've got to do it for yourself. The only way to get better is do it, do a little every day, and turn it into a habit.
So thank you for being here. Thank you for watching.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Bye.